I was wondering if you're feeling the way I do about all of these virtual seminars. Uh,
Not
yeah,
my favorite, but I think they're our new normal.
but stay into this one. And a little pointer, uh, if you're getting frustrated with them, if you take the word webinar and you scramble the letters, you end up with wine bar.
Mm.
Feeling better now?
Just a bit. And hopefully you will feel a little bit better when we get to the end because we're going to share some opportunities for incorporating tax management to enhance your cash flow.
Ah, okay. That would be, we're talking about PPP and idle loan, or are we going to go back to those prior programs that everybody seems to have forgotten about?
We're going to go backward and forward. Before PPP came into play, Congress passed a couple of acts that allowed for credits to employers, again, on the focus of keeping people employed and keeping paychecks in people's hands. And those credits expanded the time frame all the way to the end of the year and are still available. So even though the PPP and the EIDL loans are getting ready to phase out either through deadlines or money is running out, there are still some opportunities available to small businesses and sole proprietors. The employee retention credit is the first one. And if you did not get a PPP loan, this one is for you. In order to qualify, though, you have to have been shut down either partially or in full by a government agency, or your gross receipts have dropped to the point that they're 50% below the same time period from 2019. It's only eligible until you can recover. Recovery is being back to being open or your gross receipts have recovered to 80% of the same year-over-year time period.
Okay, and again, though, if you've received a PPP loan, you're not eligible for this one at all.
Correct.
Okay,
Nor are self-employed persons eligible because they don't really get wages. And this is a retention credit.
okay. So the other programs, there's eligibility even if you've received the PPP loan.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, this credit is up to $5,000 per employee, and all employees qualify if you have a total of 100 or below. If you exceed 100 employees, then there are some positions that may not qualify. The credit is taken against your payroll taxes and it can be refunded when you do your reconciliation on your 941.
okay.
Okay?
So it's not too late.
It's not
All
too
right.
late. The emergency paid sick leave credit is another type of credit for employers, but this one does apply to self-employed people as well. This one is for any sick leave that is taken between April 1st and December 31st of 2020.
Okay, well beyond what we're thinking about 8 weeks and 20 some odd weeks for PPP.
Correct.
This goes on. Okay, so this is a pre-planning.
Yes, this is pre-planning or possibly post-planning, but pre-planning works best. So your employee calls in sick. If they are not able to work because they're under a quarantine order or they are sick, they could get up to you could get up to $5,110 of a credit for their sick time
So
wages.
this isn't a deduction. These are dollar credits back to the employer.
Correct. Likewise, if they need to take their sick leave because their uh, family members are sick or their children are home because there's no care provided or school closures, then you can receive up to $2,000 of credit against their wages for this time period.
Okay, and my understanding is there's also reimbursement for Medicare taxes as well as qualified health care plans.
Absolutely.
Premiums.
These wages are being paid by the government, so you are not responsible for these taxes. The Medicare is going to come back to you via a credit, and the Social Security piece is not going to be charged to you at all. And the qualified health care plan that you provide for your employees will be prorated for these same time periods. But keep in mind, these wages cannot be utilized for the PPP. So it's one or the other. So if you're using the PPP money to pay this section of wages, you cannot take this credit.
And that would be for that specific time period, that wage period, right?
Correct.
So the PPP uh, would have basically paid for that wage period, but then following the use of the PPP money.
Or before. So for
Okay.
example, wages paid in April, early April. Schools were out, employees were calling in, may have been sick. You may be able to take this credit for those April wages, and then you get the PPP in May, and then your May wages are paid for by the PPP. If you've exhausted the maximum amount for each employee, then you wouldn't have anything after the
Okay.
PPP. But if you've not reached the maximum per employee amount, then this fall, when we go back to school and there may be more shutdowns or more.
Right, an extended fall break or an early winter
Mhm.
recess, or the teacher tests positive for COVID and they send or little Johnny, little Johnny, how he works, and they end up sending the whole class home to quarantine for 2 weeks.
Right.
And the employee now has to stay home, is not able to work from home. So they're able to still get paid, and it's fair that these costs are reimbursed because the employer is not receiving an economic benefit, even though they're paying that employee.
Correct. And this came about because a number of small businesses do not provide a family or sick leave benefit in general because it's not feasible when you're that small. So the government wanted to ensure that everyone would stay home when they were sick or needed to stay home. Therefore, the government has stepped in to pay the wages during this time period. Self-employed individuals can also qualify for these, but they are not eligible to receive a refund. If when you do your 941, the credit against the payroll taxes is greater, you can have a refund for these items.
Okay.
Now, once the employee has exhausted their sick leave, there's an additional leave credit available if they need to stay longer for taking care of a child. This is the family medical leave credit, and it extends that same sick leave credit out to 10 weeks and up to $10,000. So this is a significant credit that is available and I think is going to come into play as the PPP funds are depleted and we go through what potentially may be round two when schools go back into active.
Okay, so it'd be wise for every employer to know about this, especially if they want to protect their employees.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The final thing that is available for employers is the payroll tax deferral. The deferral is just that. You still owe the payroll taxes, but you may wait to pay them until 2021 or 2022
Wow.
if cash flow is that tight.
But these are the government's money that you've withheld from the employees' checks, which to me is a really dangerous place to be, because I know in the past, the owners and officers of corporations, if they failed to forward those withholdings, they were subject to criminal charges.
It's actually only the 6.2% Social Security a business pays, but it's still a fiduciary responsibility. And it is still the #1 enforcement area of the IRS. And this has teeth. You're absolutely right. This should be a last measure and should only be considered by those that are a seasonal business that knows for a fact the cash flow will improve later in the year.
Right, because it could be a personal liability.
Absolutely.
Okay. And how do you get the credits? Can you show me the money?
Well, I'm not a sportscaster, but 941 is where you obtain it. The Form 941 is how you reconcile your payroll wages and payroll taxes each quarter. The second quarter, when most of these credits were available, is due by July 31st. If you now think you qualify, you can amend that return and obtain the credit. For a sole practitioner or self-employed person, the reconciliation is done on Schedule SE with your year-end 1040. Again, Employers can be refunded this and receive an advance. A sole proprietor will need to adjust their quarterly tax deposits. If you want an advance during the quarter, so it's not the end of third quarter, we're in the middle of third quarter right now, you can also apply and receive an advanced refund of these credits if you know at the end of the third quarter you're going to
Sure,
have them.
there's a form for that.
There's always a form. This one is number 7200.
Okay. And yeah, I guess just as we had with the PPP, and we've talked about that and the documentation, there's, I believe, even more documentation
Absolutely.
with this.
With this one, because the wages could apply to multiple different credits but can only be used once, you need to track what wages are being utilized for what program. This employee leave request should be written, and talk with HR about how much information you can glean from the employee. If they're staying home because they are sick, you get a greater credit than if they're staying home because a family member is sick. But HR has to tell you what you can ask, because that gets into an area I don't know. You really need your accounting department to be staying on top of all of the pennies with this one. But the important thing is these are tools that can help you with your cash flow and help you with your tax management. And tax management is going to be key.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I don't think if these wages are paid by the government, you will be able to deduct them on your return. So even though this is not a taxable credit, the expenses will not be deductible and therefore increase the potential income tax at the end of the year.
Well, so staying on top of these things. There's so many things we don't know, and there's so many things we have no idea what's coming. It can get confusing. It's frustrating. Uh, but the idea would be to maintain the right attitude. Uh, I'm assuming that most people on this, listening to this, are entrepreneurs who are by definition people that find new uses for otherwise idle assets. All right, that may be their time, their talents, their resources, expertise, or their influence, simply applying their wisdom. We've seen many companies reorganize on how they're working, what they're selling, to be able to stay afloat. They were creative, and that's why they've gotten into business to begin with, because they needed to release that creativity. So know that you can come through the other side. If you need help, there's some additional resources on AvantiPro.com, and we're here.
Yes.
So,
Give us a call if you need us to help you. Take care.
thank you.